School of Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC 010 titled Managerial Economics for MBA Program. Presenting Block 4 titled Pricing Decisions, Unit 11, Pricing Under Perfect Competition and Pure Monopoly.
Objectives. After going through this unit, you should be able to describe the characteristics of pure or perfect competition and pure monopoly, identify the equilibrium conditions for a firm and the industry in a perfectly competitive situation, examine price output decisions under pure monopoly, and analyze the relevance of pure or perfect competition and pure monopoly. Introduction. In the preceding unit, you have been introduced to the concept of market structure and the impact it has on the competitive behavior of firms. You must have noted that the number and size of the firms is an important determinant of the structure of the industry or market. In this unit, we shall analyze the behavior of a firm under two different market structures, namely pure or perfect competition and monopoly. The crucial parameter of the size of the constituent firms in relation to the total industry's output. Throughout this unit, we go by the assumption that the firms are guided by profit maximization. Characteristics of perfect competition. Perfect competition is a form of market in which there are a large number of buyers and sellers competing with each other in the purchase and sale of goods, respectively, and no individual buyer or seller has any influence over the price. Thus, perfect competition is an ideal form of market structure in which there is the greatest degree of competition. A perfectly competitive market has the following characteristics. 1. There are a large number of independent, relatively small sellers and buyers as compared to the market as a whole. That is why none of them is capable of influencing the market price. Further, buyers or sellers should not have any kind of association or union to arrive at an understanding with regard to market demand or price or sales. 2. The products sold by different sellers are homogeneous and identical. There should not be any differentiation of products by sellers by way of quality, variety, color, design, packaging, or other selling conditions of the product. That is, from the point of view of buyers, the products of competing sellers are completely substitutable. 3. There is absolutely no restriction on entry of new firms into the industry, and the existing firms are free to leave the industry. This ensures that even in the long run, the number of firms would continue to remain large and the relative share of each firm would continue to remain insignificant. 4. Both buyers and sellers in the market have perfect knowledge about the conditions in which they are operating. Buyers know the prices being charged by different competing sellers, and sellers know the prices that different buyers are offering. 5. The distance between the locations of competing sellers is not significant, and therefore the price of the product is not affected by the cost of transportation of goods. Buyers do not have to incur noticeable transport costs if they want to switch over from one seller to another. As mentioned in the previous unit, it is difficult to find a market that satisfies all the textbook conditions of perfect competition. There are markets that come close to fulfilling these stringent conditions, but none that completely is in synchronization with all of them. You might well ask the rationale for studying this market structure if it does not exist in the real world. The answer is that perfect competition is the ideal market and serves as a benchmark. We can use the outcomes of other markets to compare with outcomes that would have been achieved under perfect competition. For instance, if the market is competitive, prices would be lower and closer to costs, while if the market is monopolized, then prices are likely to be higher. Another useful comparison relates to the concept of consumer surplus. Intuitively, consumer surplus can be thought of as the difference between the maximum amount the consumer is willing to pay for a product and the amount he actually pays. Think about your purchase of a big-ticket item such as a camera. You have a price in mind that is the maximum you are willing to pay. The difference between this and the price actually paid is the consumer surplus. In perfectly competitive markets, consumer surplus is the maximum, while in monopoly markets it is low. In fact, it is the endeavor of monopolies to capture as much of the consumer surplus as possible. When a perfectly competitive industry gets monopolized, there is a transfer of surplus from the consumer to the producer. Or stated differently, the producer is able to increase his or her surplus at the expense of the consumer. On the other hand, when a monopolized industry becomes competitive, there is transfer from producers to the consumers, that is, consumers become better off when there is increased competition. An illustration of this can be gauged from the conduct of the automobile industry in India since it was deregulated in 1991. The consumers have benefited from competition in the sector, and one can definitely assert that producer margins have declined to the benefit of the consumers. Profit maximizing output in the short run. Having examined the rationale for studying perfectly competitive markets, let us analyze the profit maximizing output of a profitable competitive firm in the short run. As you already know, the short run is defined as a period of time in which at least one input is fixed. Often, the firm's capital stock is viewed as a fixed input. Accordingly, this analysis assumes that the number of production facilities in the industry and the size of each facility do not change because the period being considered is too short to allow firms to enter or leave the industry or to make any changes in their operations. Under perfect competition, since an individual firm cannot influence the market price by raising or lowering its input, the firm faces a horizontal demand curve, that is, the demand curve of any single firm is perfectly elastic. Its elasticity is equal to infinity at all levels of output. If a firm charges a price slightly higher than the prevailing market price, demand for that firm will fall to zero because there are many other sellers selling exactly the same product. On the other hand, if a firm reduces its price slightly, its demand will increase to infinity and thus other firms will match the low price. A firm under perfect competition is a price taker and not a price maker. Because an individual firm's demand or average revenue AR curve is horizontal under perfect competition, the marginal revenue MR curve of the firm is also horizontal, coincides with the AR curve. In other words, AR and MR are constant and equal at all levels of output. You should satisfy yourself that if price is constant, marginal revenue will be equal to price. Profit maximizing output in the long run. Now let us analyze the profit maximizing output decision by perfectly competitive firms in the long run when all inputs and therefore costs are variable. In the long run, a manager can choose to employ any plant size required to produce the efficient level of output that will maximize profit. The plant size or scale of operation is fixed in the short run, but in the long run it can be altered to suit the economic conditions. In the long run, the firm attempts to maximize profits in the same manner as in the short run, except that there are no fixed costs. All costs are variable in the long run. Here, again, the firm takes the market price as given, and this market price is the firm's marginal revenue. The firm would increase output as long as the marginal revenue from each additional unit is greater than the marginal cost of that unit. It would decrease output when marginal cost exceeds marginal revenue. This way, the firm maximizes profit by equating marginal cost and marginal revenue. MR is equals to MC. The firm would operate at a scale such that long-run marginal cost equals price. This would be the most profitable situation for an individual firm. Therefore, if the price is 17 rupees per unit, the firm will produce 240 units of output, generating a profit of 1,200 rupees. This profit is variously known as above normal, supernormal, or economic profit. The crucial question that one needs to ask is whether this is a sustainable situation in a perfectly competitive market That is, whether a firm in a perfectly competitive industry can continue to make positive economic profits even in the long run? The answer is unambiguously no. This result derives from the assumption that in a perfectly competitive market, there are no barriers to entry. Recall that in a market economy, profit is a signal that guides investment and therefore resource allocation decisions. In this case, the situation will change with other prospective entrants in the industry. The economic force that attracts new firms to enter into or drives out of an industry is the existence of economic profit or economic losses, respectively. Economic profits attract new firms into the industry whose entry increases industry supply. As a result, the prices would fall and the firms in the industry adjust their output levels in order to remain at profit maximization. This process continues until all economic profits are eliminated. There is no longer any attraction for new firms to enter since they can only earn normal profits. Analogous to economic profit serves as a signal to attract investment, economic losses drive some existing firms out of the industry. The industry supply declines due to exit of these firms, which pushes the market prices up. As the prices have risen, all the firms in the industry adjust their output levels in order to remain at a profit maximization level. Firms continue to exit until economic losses are eliminated and economic profit becomes zero. That is, firms earn only a normal rate of profit. Characteristics of monopoly. Monopoly can be described as a market situation where a single firm controls the entire supply of a product which has no close substitutes. The market structure characteristics of monopoly are number and size of distribution of sellers, single seller, number and size of distribution of buyers, unspecified, production differentiation, no close substitutes, conditions of entry and exit, prohibited or difficult entry. Though perfect competition and monopoly are the two extreme cases of market structure, they both have one thing in common. They do not have to compete with other individual participants in the market. Sellers in perfect competition are so small that they can ignore each other. At the other extreme, the monopolist is the only seller in the market and has no competitors. The market or industry demand curve and that of the individual firm are the same under monopoly, since the industry consists of only one firm. Managers of firm in a perfectly competitive market facing a horizontal demand curve would have no control over the price and they simply choose the profit maximizing output. However, the monopoly firm facing a downward sloping demand curve has power to control the price of its product. If the demand for the product remains unchanged, the monopoly firm can raise the price as much as it wishes by reducing its output. On the other hand, if the monopoly firm wishes to sell a larger quantity of its product, it must lower the price because total supply in the market will increase to the extent that its output increases. While an individual firm under perfect competition is a price taker, a monopolist firm is a price maker. It may, however, be noted that to have price setting power, a monopoly must not only be the sole seller of the product, but also sell a product which does not have close substitutes. Profit maximizing output of a monopoly firm. Often, students are tempted into thinking that since a monopolist is the only producer in the market, he or she will be able to charge any price for the product. While a monopolist will certainly charge a high price, it must also ensure that it is maximizing profit. Our earlier discussion proves that a profit-maximizing monopoly firm determines its output at that level where its marginal cost, MC, intersects its downward-sloping marginal revenue, MR, from below. Since the MR curve of the monopoly firm is below its average revenue or demand curve at all levels of output, and at the equilibrium output level, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The profit-maximizing monopoly price is greater than marginal cost. You may recall the profit-maximizing price under perfect competition is equal to marginal cost. Since the demand curve of the monopoly firm is above the firm's average cost curve, the price at equilibrium output is also greater than average cost. Therefore, supernormal profits are a distinguishing feature of equilibrium. Monopoly power. Analysis shows that whereas under perfect competition price is equal to marginal cost and profits are normal in the long run, under monopoly price is greater than marginal cost and profits are above normal even in the long run. Therefore, the monopolist has power to charge a price which is higher than marginal cost and earn supernormal profits. The extent of monopoly power of a firm can be calculated in terms of how much price is greater than marginal cost. Recall that a perfectly competitive firm sets P is equals to MC. Thus, the greater the difference, the greater is the monopoly power. Economist A.P. Lerner devised such an index to measure the degree of monopoly power and which has to come to be known as the Lerner index. The monopoly power of a firm is mu is equals to P minus MC divided by P, where P is equals to price of the firm's product, MC is equals to firm's marginal cost. The monopoly power of a firm is inversely related to elasticity of demand for its product. The less elastic the demand for its product, the greater would be its monopoly power and vice versa. Elasticity of demand depends on the number and closeness of the substitutes available for a product. In the real world, we find some essential goods and services like life-saving medicines, petroleum, cooking gas, railways, etc. enjoy a high degree monopoly power because the demand for these products is highly inelastic. Left to itself, the monopoly could price such inelastic products at rates that do not meet the social objectives of the government and policy makers. Thus, we often witness government intervention in monopolies. For example, railway ticket prices are fixed by the government and electricity tariffs are set by a regulatory authority. The reason why monopolies need to be regulated is discussed in the next section. Welfare. Perfect competition versus monopoly. Our discussion reveals that in a pure monopoly, price will generally be greater than marginal cost and that the firm is able to generate supernormal profits at the expense of welfare of consumers and society even in the long run. Recall that key conditions that give rise to monopolies are economies of scale and barriers to entry. On the other hand, production processes like food processing, textiles, garments, wood and furniture, it is relatively easy to enter the market as a supplier. For example, capital requirements are low and sunk costs are also low. Many service industries like travel agencies fall into this category. In such industries, competition ensures that prices are set right and moreover the threat of entry ensures that prices never exceed long-run average cost. Moreover, competition also ensures that price equals long-run marginal cost. Hence, the price of a good accurately reflects the opportunity cost of manufacturing it. Problems arise from leaving everything to the market, however, when a situation of monopoly occurs. In economists' jargon, there are economies of scale to be exploited when one company meets market demand. There are typically also major barriers to entry in such industries. Most public utilities, electricity generation, water supply, gas supply, and perhaps national telecommunication system have technologies of this sort. There are several special problems for these industries. First, their size and capital intensity often puts particular strain on private capital markets in satisfying their investment needs. In India, in the 1990s, strain was felt instead on the public coffers, and this was a major factor behind the move towards disinvestment and privatization. Hence, while for example, automobile or chemicals manufacture are also characterized by huge-scale economies, governments have rarely seen it as their role to regulate companies in these industries. The question for policymakers is what to do about normal monopolies like power and water supply. Left to themselves, they will charge monopoly prices and restrict output. The absence of any competitive threat will also probably leave such organizations wasteful, inefficient, and sluggish. Since all costs can be passed on to the consumers, there will be little incentive for managers to keep them under control. Experience from, for example, the railways suggest that it will not be long before the absence of competitive pressures may damage the motives for innovation and change, so crucial in such capital-intensive sectors. Thus, In some cases, a regulator is appointed who must fix the natural monopolist's price. In India, privatization of power and telecommunications has been accompanied by the creation of a regulator, while there is no such institution for cement, automobile, or chemical industry. If we now consider the reverse case, that is, a monopoly being broken to foster competition, the result will be transfer of income from producers to consumers and elimination of deadweight loss. Herein lies the economic basis for regulation of monopoly firms. It is to generate the outcomes of competitive markets and pass these benefits to consumers in the form of lower prices. If competition exists in market, then arguably that is the best regulation. If it does not, and the industry is envisaged to play a social role, regulation of monopoly becomes an important policy objective. Implications of perfect competition and monopoly for managerial decision making. The assumptions underlying perfect competition market are very restrictive. Few markets are found with characteristics of many small sellers, easy entry and exit, and an undifferentiated product. Normally, a majority of modern industries operate under conditions of oligopoly or monopolistic competition. Perfect competition and monopoly are the two extreme market conditions which we rarely come across in the real world of business. Then, the question arises as to why study them. It is useful to think of perfect competition and pure monopoly as extremes with other market structures placed in between. There are many industries that have most of the characteristics of perfect competition or monopoly. The two extreme models therefore serve as benchmarks and provide guidance in making decisions. Consider the following case. A multinational soft drink company P was in bankruptcy for the second time. The president of the company tried to sell it to soft drink company C, but C company wanted no part of the deal. In order to reduce costs, the president purchased a large supply of recycled 12-ounce beer bottles. At that time, soft drink P and C were sold in 6-ounce bottles. Initially, company P priced the bottles at 10 cents, twice the amount of the original 6-ounce bottles, but with little success. Then, the president of the company had the brilliant idea of selling the 12-ounce bottles of soft drink P at the same price as the 6-ounce bottles of soft drink C. Then, scale took off and shortly soft drink P was out of bankruptcy and soon making a very nice profit. Soft drink P pricing decision was clearly crucial to the life of the firm. The primary background necessary for understanding the pricing decision is a good understanding of the law of demand, that is, as price goes up, demand goes down, and some understanding of the amount by which a price increase affects a quantity decrease, that is, the price elasticity of demand. We will start by examining the polar cases of pricing under perfect competition and pricing under monopoly, and then move on to examining soft drink P and C companies' situation. Alfred Marshall, a famous 19th century economist, used a fish market as an example of perfect competition. For the sake of argument, consider a fish seller selling cod. How would he or she price his product? First, he or she would look around and find out at what price his or her numerous competitors were selling cod. He or she certainly could not price above the competitors, since cod is pretty much identical and consumers should not care from whom they purchase. Furthermore, in fish markets, it is quite easy for consumers to compare prices. So, if he or she priced above his or her competitors, he or she would not sell any fish. Suppose he or she decided to price below his or her competitors. All of the customers would certainly purchase from him or her. However, if he or she was still making a profit, the other competitors would also be making a profit at the lower price and would match the price cut in order to retain their customers. They may even consider lowering price more if they could still make a profit and capture further customers. This reasoning, along with the ease of entry of new fish seller, if there is a profit to be made, ensures that the price being charged is equal to the cost of supplying an additional fish or the marginal cost. A fish seller will be a price taker, setting his or her price identically to his or her competitors' prices. A firm is a monopoly if it has exclusive control over the supply of a product or service. Therefore, a monopolist in his or her pricing decisions cannot consider the pricing decision of rival firms. So, What does he or she consider? The smart monopolist considers the incremental effect of his decision, that is, what is the revenue to be received from selling one additional unit of a product and what are the costs of selling one additional unit of a product. Certainly, if the costs of selling one additional unit of a product exceed the revenues, the monopolist would certainly not want to sell that additional product. The law of demand says that he or she could raise the price of his or her product and then sell less. Alternatively, if the revenues of selling an additional unit of a product exceed the costs of selling that unit, the monopolist should want to sell more units. The law of demand says that he or she could sell more by lowering his or her price. Thus, by setting the price correctly, the monopolist can sell the exact number of units such that the cost of selling one additional unit exactly equals the revenues of selling the additional unit, which, by the above reasoning, is the only optimal price. However, there is an additional complication. The cost of selling one additional unit do not include any part of the salary of the CEO or the rental costs of the plant. Both must be paid whether or not the additional unit is sold. Thus, in the long run, if a monopolist cannot cover his or her overhead by pricing in the optimal manner, he or she should shut down. The situation involving soft drinks P and soft drinks C clearly differs from either of the above scenarios. But what can we learn from both the cases? First, P clearly saw that C was pricing the 6-ounce bottles at 5 cents. By pricing the 12-ounce bottles at 5 cents also, P made the bet that C would not cut its price. C did not see the need to cut price because its product was different from P and it did not fear losing many of its customers. Whether the gain in revenues resulting from increased demand would offset the loss in revenue from the lower price depends on the price elasticity of demand. The price elasticity of demand faced by soft drink P depends on soft drink C, response to the price cut, and the consumer's responses. As we saw above, P made the assumption that C would not cut price. P counted on a highly elastic consumer response, that is, the percentage change in quantity purchased by the consumer due to the lower price, and therefore profits would accrue to P. What other concerns you think played a part in the soft drink P company's decision? Summary. In this unit, you have studied the market forces operating in perfect competition and pure monopoly, and the pricing and output decisions in these two market structures. The perfect competition model assumes a large number of small sellers and buyers, identical products, and an easy entry and exit conditions. In perfect competition, firms face a horizontal demand curve at equilibrium price. Price is determined by the interaction of the market supply and demand curves. Since no single firm has control over price, the objective of managers is to determine the level of output that maximizes profit. The perfectly competitive firm maximizes profit at a point where price equals marginal cost. The firm can make an economic profit or loss in the short run depending on the market price. If the price drops below average variable cost, the firm should shut down. Or, even if the firm is making a profit in the short run, it may wish to change its plant size or capacity in the long run in order to earn more profit. The monopolist is a single seller of a differentiated product. Entry into the market is difficult or prohibited. Being the single seller, the monopolist has power over price. For maximizing profits, the firm produces until marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This way, the monopolist earns economic profits in both the short and long run, as well as because entry is restricted for new firms. In the real world, few market structures meet the restrictive assumptions for perfect competition or monopoly. Still, these two models are useful because many industries have the characteristics of perfect competition or monopoly. Moreover, the perfectly competitive model serves as a benchmark for evaluating the performance of actual markets and provides guidance for public policy.
We were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC 010, titled Managerial Economics. Course Coordinator Dr. Leena Singh. Voiceover by Renuka. Edited by Savita. Program assisted by Tarannum Jahan. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.